My name is Ziemowit Janaszek. People call me Ziemek. It's the diminutive of my name. I'm from Poland originally, but my home parish is on Tybee Island, St. Michael. There's the family who, when I came to the United States, they adopted me, and so I joined their parish.
My name is Kevin Brasky. I'm from Warner Robins, Georgia. My home parish is Sacred Heart.
Yeah, my name's Jared Miller. My hometown is Woodbine, Georgia, and my home parish is Our Lady Star to Sea in St. Mary's, Georgia.
My name is Francisco Javier Gamboa Felix, such a long name, and I am from Zacatecas in northern Mexico. And my home parish here in the Diocese of Savannah is St. Francis Cabrera Catholic Church.
My name is Fred Williams. My hometown is Lawrenceville, Georgia, but my home parish here in the diocese is St. Joseph's in Waycross.
My name is Noah Pace. My hometown is Augusta, Georgia, and my home parish is St. Teresa of Avila in Grovetown.
Hi, my name is Joseph Thornburn, and I am the new Seminarian in the Diocese of Savannah.
My name is Benjamin Earl Ayler. I am from Warner Robins, Georgia, and my home parish is Sacred Heart in Warner Robins, Georgia.
So my seminary is in Florida. It's St. Vincent de Paul Regional Seminary, and it's in Boynton Beach, and I am about to start my third year of theology in September. I just finished my pastoral assignment in Columbus, Georgia at St. Anne Parish.
So I'm a seminarian at Notre Dame Seminary in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I just finished my pastoral year and I'm going back for my third year of theology.
The seminary I go to is St. Vincent de Paul Regional Seminary in Boynton Beach, Florida. I just finished second theology, and I'll be going on my pastoral year this next year at St. Joseph in Macon. I'll be there for the entire year.
I attend St. Vincent de Paul Regional Seminary in Boynton Beach, Florida, and I'm going into theology for this upcoming year.
I attend St. Vincent de Paul Regional Seminary in Boynton Beach, Florida. I have just completed my second year of theology and am about to begin my pastoral year at St. Anne's in Columbus.
So I just finished second theology down at Notre Dame Seminary in New Orleans.
Before I moved to the Diocese of Savannah, I took the BA Philosophy in St. John's University in Queens, and I studied for Diocese of Ogdensburg in the up north of New York State. And for the next semester, I go to the St. Vincent de Paul in Florida for the first theology.
My seminary is St. Joseph's Seminary College in Covington, Louisiana, and I am going into my pre-theology second year.
I'm not going to be very original. It's a rosary. I think that's why, because when my journey of discernment began, the rosary was like a pivotal prayer for me, through which I tried to ask God if priesthood is actually my way to go, and I receive a lot of answers through that prayer.
I'd have to say the rosary. I think it's an important devotion. It's the one I do the most frequently. I try and pray it every day, try and finish it every day. Sometimes I get sidetracked and distracted, but I believe that devotion to the Blessed Virgin is extremely important. So that's a very solid rosary. It's tried and true, and there are many other ones to try and to use, but there's no reason to try and change things when something has worked for so long. So,
My favorite devotion is the devotion to the Sacred Blood. I think it's one of the lesser known understandings of our faith. I think just thinking about looking at the chalice during ordination and seeing the miracle of the blood making itself known. It's a fantastic devotion.
Perhaps the rosary and a devotion to the most blessed sacraments as well, because that's the center of our Christian faith. That's the point to which all the sacraments, to which all our Christian life tends to.
My favorite devotion is definitely the sorrowful mysteries of the Rosary. Personally, it just helps me really live the mysteries of Christ and his ministry and ultimately the culmination of his ministry here on earth.
My favorite devotion is probably anything to do with Our Lady, but particularly the brown scapular. It really does sort of invoke the image of the mantle of Our Lady.
My favorite devotion is the Rosary, the Gospel, and I like to have the meditation every day before the Mass. This is the way of my favorite devotion.
My favorite devotion, of course, has to be the Rosary. It's just so very reliable.
So there's an interesting story with my confirmation. When I was 15, I was confirmed in Poland, not being really active and faithful to the church. I was very rebellious. So basically I did my confirmation for the sake of my parents, and they asked me to choose St. Francis because my grandfather was Francis. So they asked me to take St. Francis, in the memory of my grandfather.
Yeah, so I chose St. Patrick as my confirmation saint. One is my middle name, it's my dad's name, and although I have a Polish last name, I have a lot, there's a long story with that, but we're mainly Irish. So there's this deep sense of some sort of Irish Catholic pride. Even though I've never been to Ireland, no one in my family sounds Irish. We're so long distance away from that history, but there's still some pride in that and being part of that culture at some point in time, and wanting to know more about St. Patrick and knowing that was probably the reason I chose that.
My confirmation saint is Saint Sebastian. So I grew up in St. Mary's, which is a Navy base area, Kings Bay Navy base, and I just was around a lot of military people. And at the time, I was really into sports when I was in 8th grade. So much like a lot of similarly, like to other kids in 8th grade, they choose Saint Sebastian.
Well, in Mexico, as it is here in America, we don't have that tradition of embracing or adopting the name of the saint. But we get prepared for maybe a couple of years before, after Holy Communion, the first Holy Communion, before we get into confirmation.
My confirmation saint is St. Francis of Assisi. At the time when I chose him, I was currently working at Zoo Atlanta and had a great love, and still do have a great love of animals and wildlife. But even still today, I really admire him for his devotion to the Eucharist and his love of poverty, and am inspired to, in a sense, emulate him as much as I can in my ministry.
My confirmation saint is St. Padre Pio, and I really chose him because I saw in him the ideal priest that I'd like to imitate. He had the stigmata, he suffered well for Christ and for the salvation of souls, and I wanted that for my own priesthood.
My confirmation saint is St. Peter, because he was recommended by my father, and in learning more about him, he truly was somebody that I could identify with and truly could see myself in and see in me in my own life.
So in 2016, I went for a pilgrimage to Częstochowa, which is one of the famous sanctuaries in Poland, the place of pilgrimages where millions of people go every year from different cities. From my city, it takes 7 days to go there, and I took this pilgrimage, which was spiritually and physically very interesting and difficult experience. And on that pilgrimage, I received some graces and inspirations to pursue priesthood. The message from God was really clear for me. And after finishing the pilgrimage, I pursued discernment, really like concretely asking God if priesthood is my way. And through this priest, Father David Kwiatkowski, who was back then, and he's still here, was in Savannah Diocese. Whenever he came back for vacations later on in December, the same year, 2016, I asked him about studying in the United States, if it's possible, and what are the chances that you could go there and study to priesthood. And he was very blunt that that's opportunity, and he doesn't see any problems with that. So he, while on this meeting, he sent an email to the bishop, back then Bishop Hartmeyer, and while we were talking, the Bishop Hartmeyer responded that he is interested and open for that. So in that very moment, my life was basically changing. So since then, the diocese invited me to come over to visit a couple of weeks later, and I came here. I felt my intuition was that this is where I'm supposed to be.
I think many things. I think my family's devotion to the church, being involved in the youth group. I was named after Bishop Kevin Boland, so he's my parents' pastor when they were kids. So there's always an importance of my name, where that came from. When I was a kid, I felt like I was called at Mass to replace Father Fred Nigel one day, be a priest. And so that's always been on the back of my mind. Ran from that for a little bit in high school and college. But I think one of the big things too is retreats that I went to, but one of the biggest things is the regular presence of priests in my family's life. I can think of every priest that has been a Sacred Heart Warner Robins, and neither other priests, but mainly it's the Sacred Heart priests that, because of my parents' involvement in the parish, they came over for dinner. We'd have Father Fred Nigel, Monsignor Nigel over for Christmas Eve dinner, and so there's deep sense of respect. And because of that normalcy of that, I could see that was, as I believe it's a line Father Tim McEwen uses, like putting priesthood just on the menu, in a sense of like all the other job descriptions, like, oh, like priesthood's a possibility as well, just because of the familiarity with it all.
Little things, little acts of devotion. When I was in 10th grade, I went to our DYC in 2015, and I remember having an encounter with Jesus in the Eucharist. Just in adoration, it was the first time I've ever been to adoration, and it was that moment of realizing that Christ was present, and like seeing the priest at the time who was doing the adoration, he was physically crying, and that's when I know, like, I saw the humanity of Christ through the priest, and that's when I think I started my inspiration to enter seminary.
I will say what inspired me to say yes to Jesus' call to become a priest. First, I will say to serve, but service is not particular of a priest. I mean, you can serve wherever you are, whatever walk of life you take, you can serve. But the thing that you can touch the hearts of many people through sacramental service and pastoral service, that makes the whole difference.
For me, the sacrament of reconciliation was really what inspired me to enter seminary. After having a very powerful encounter with the Lord in the sacrament of reconciliation, I really began to think about what is it that I want to do. And I could not get the image out of my head that I was a priest absolving others. And that sort of image that I received in that reconciliation really stuck with me and really led me into the process of seminary.
Well, of course, the Holy Spirit. But really, the example of a good and holy Irish priest who was really my first pastor when I was growing up as a young child. Seeing his joy, his holiness, his love for the people of the parish really did inspire me.
The one thing inspired me to enter the seminary is I want to become a priest. I want to serve the people, and I want to serve the people of God.
I perceived the voice of God. I perceived that I was called to follow him, and where he was calling me was to seminary.
So, first of all, when you look at the picture, when I got here, I had hair. I don't have hair right now, and I didn't have a beard, and I have beard right now. So through the years, my facial appearances has changed, and also, being in the seminary, you spend a lot of time like thinking about yourself, where you are at, what is God calling you to do, and you're constantly evaluated by the formation team, by yourself. You have conversations with your formator, spiritual director. So this is a very intense process, and it changes you in ways that you can see at the moment, But when I look back, I can see, there was a lot of maturity, a lot of surrender, a lot of less self-centered approach to life. It's more focused on the people, because we are exposed to so many different ministries throughout the years, that you learn how to serve people. So I think that's how this whole process works, and that's the main goal probably of the formation, to be able to give up your life, sacrifice your life to God.
Yeah, I think it's challenged me a lot. One of the biggest challenges, and I knew this coming in because of advice from Father Kevin O'Keefe, that there are going to be days, if you enjoy every day of seminary, something is wrong. Because there are sense where you're going to be challenged and you're going to grow a lot, which entails a little bit of suffering, a little bit of iron sharpening iron, as we hear from Scripture. And you definitely see that. You get to see the beauty of the faith, and sometimes you get to see the difficulty of it as well. Where, guess what? Like, everyone you're living with in seminary that's trying to grow in holiness is also a sinner, and they need to experience deeper conversion, as do I. And they have taught me a lot about patience. And I think that's one of the things that you don't really see. People kind of see, the priests and the seminarians like, oh, they're so holy, and we try to be, but there's a deep sense of reality. There's humanity underneath the collar, and there's a struggle with our own whatever else we got going on, our family past histories, and some people come in better set up for success than others, and they have to go through more, and kind of seeing that, because that also is easy. Once you kind of understand that, you can easily shift that mindset into ministry, where even when people seem all put together, it's pretty amazing to see that deep down we all still need that forgiveness and love of God. And I think seminaries taught me that, and then even just pastoral ministry, being just finishing up my pastoral year in Brunswick, where you're ministering to people from all different sections of society, different cultures, different tax brackets. One day you're in a small trailer, next you're in a middle-class house, one day you're in a 3-story mansion, because those are the people that we serve. But deep down, once again, each group of those are beloved children of God who sin and fall but need to get back up. And I think that's something you learn, is just that we are all in it together. It sounds kind of cliche, but there is genuine truth to that. And I think that's something, I think I even though I knew the priests a lot, as far as parishioners go, it was always easy to just put a priest on a pedestal. But then once you live with priests or live with seminarians, you get to see like, oh, we are definitely indeed all human beings with our own little quirks and foibles that the Lord is going to use to minister to others and minister to brother seminarians and brother priests that live in house at the seminary and at rectories. So I think that's one thing I think I kind of knew was going to happen, but wasn't completely aware of how big of an impact. It's probably been the greatest joy and probably the greatest difficulty.
Yeah, very, like I always say, like when I entered seminary, I'm definitely different now from when I entered. I think one of the many gifts that I think like I've grown into was the act of listening. I think that's one of like the things that like priests need to understand is how to be good listeners.
Speaking of service, one goes to seminary with a dream, with an ideal. You want to become a priest. You are not there because you want to be a seminarian. You are there because you want to become a priest, the priest of Jesus Christ. However, that particular dream or ideal gets strengthened as you go through seminary formation, and at the end of the day, you come to realize that you are there because you want to serve the people of God in a particular portion of the church that is a diocese through sacramental service, and that entails that you have to surrender.
I think ultimately what has really changed my life after joining seminary is just helping me, in a sense, be me, learn to be an authentic man of God, but what that actually means for me, what that means to be Fred, and who God is calling me to be. And that's an ongoing process. We can never be perfect, but we can always strive to be better versions of ourselves and who the Lord is calling us to.
think it's definitely challenged me for the better. It's stretched me, it's made me look outside of myself and really grow in virtue and strive for holiness, not for my own sake really, but for the sake of others and for the salvation of souls.
Seminary has truly awoken a love for my prayer life and has truly awoken a love for service towards others. It's just been an absolute joy to be able to go and encounter the Lord.
Don't think too much. Like, I think I had a couple of conversations with young guys who are always telling me that they are thinking about priesthood. They are, thinking about it. Like, the real discernment basically starts when you enter the seminary, when you have time for prayer, and the environment is created for that, to nourish you, to guide you, to prepare you for the discernment. And there's nothing to worry about, because my class, theology, 3 years ago, started with 28 guys. Now we have only maybe 11, I think. So not everyone who enters the seminary, it's necessarily going to be a priest. Most likely he will not be a priest. But that's the whole process. So I would say, if you have your thought in your mind, don't think too much, but reach out to somebody, maybe priest who is your pastor or associate, or a priest who you like or you have some kind of relationship with, and just talk about it, and he will guide you and make another step. Don't just get stuck in this thinking about priesthood for years. Sometimes guys can think about it for years and never make the step and to this real discernment, which begins at the seminary.
Yeah, it kind of sounds, I don't know, cliche or what, but a little bold, but I'd say just do it. It kind of sounds like Shia LaBeouf or Nike, but I think there's a reality to that, because that was one of the last things that I was told before going to seminary. Was from Father Thomas Fay, a military chaplain at Robins Air Force Base, who I've known since I was a little kid. And he said, Kevin, you've been talking about seminary forever, and you can go do a mission year, which we need good missionaries to do mission work. But the real place that you're going to actually discern, really the only place you're going to discern the priesthood, is at a seminary. And the worst that happens is if you go and realize you're not called, you can leave. So basically just go. And in a sense, that doesn't mean you just automatically go. There's obviously a process, but there's a reality of you, if you really feel called to that, then allow the Lord to work with you. And it's, 7 to 8 year process. So you don't just walk in and then walk out a priest the next week. It's years of discernment with spiritual directors and formators. So if you're early on, talk to your parish priest. If they feel like they're not really good at helping you, try and contact the diocese, contact your promoter and your deanery that's supposed to be able to help you. So plugging in and talking to a priest about it. Just because you talk about it doesn't mean you're going to go. But if you are really talking about it, at some point you got to just act on it. But going to seminary isn't the final step. It's one of the major steps, but it's a major step that's going to lead to multiple years of more steps. So I would just say, just come right along on the adventure. I was telling kids about this, you think of like Lord of the Rings or whatever adventure story you've ever watched or read, at some point in time, the character's got to come out of his shell and has got to go walk and go on this journey. He's either got to say yes or no, and because you don't get to the end if you don't try, if you don't walk, if you don't fight to go through it. And there's going to be difficulties and fears, but there's also going to be great stories and tales and laughter along the way. But there is a sense of fear of like, I don't know what's going to happen. It's like, and that's okay. And I think on top of that too is, I hear it's a misconception that people have. Like, I'll hear people, especially older guys, it's funny, will say like, I thought I was called to be a priest, but then I found out that women were pretty, and then I didn't go to seminary. And I'm like, well, that's a terrible way of discerning the priesthood, because guess what? Like, you should be attracted to women, and that should be a natural thing to want to be a father or be a father or a husband. And same with women, being a mother or a wife. Those should be natural things. Like, just because you want that doesn't say like, oh, I'm no longer called to the priesthood or the religious life. And I hear that as a misconception. Like devout Catholics will say that, like, oh, I want to be a mom or I want to be a dad, so that means I'm not called. I'm like, well, are you saying that I don't want to do that? Like there's a deep desire there, and it entails offering God, like, God, here are two good things. What do you want me to do?
Yeah, I'd like to share like the advice that I've received from my home pastor growing up, Father Marius. When I told him I wanted to go to seminary, he just told me simply to be present in the parish that you're at, whether that's altar serving, ushering, Knights of Columbus, just being involved with the parish and going on retreats if they're available, because he always says that when you serve at the altar as an altar server, that's the closest that you can get to Christ in the Eucharist. So, yeah.
Just to listen to the prompts of the Holy Spirit and be open, and pay attention to your dreams and to your ideals, and let the Holy Spirit to guide you.
Yeah. I would definitely say, don't be afraid to dive in. Don't be afraid to jump into the deep. Here in the Diocese of Savannah, we're very blessed to have seminarians as, in a sense, brothers. That we've gotten to know so many of the men around the diocese who are discerning. And I know particularly when I was discerning to join, it was talking to the seminarians, talking to the priests, talking to people in the formation that really just helped me come up with more questions, helped me really explore more of what it meant to be a seminarian, what it meant to be a priest. So don't be afraid to dive in, visit a seminary, even talk to the vocations director about what does the application process look like.
My advice to a young man considering the priesthood: don't be afraid. It can seem daunting, a call to the priesthood, but no, it's not for perfect men. And really, if God is calling you, then He'll provide all of the grace and help that you need.
The one thing is just pray. Pray is very important, and ask God about what does He want upon your life. And the second is come to the pastor and share with him about your idea about to want to become a priest. And the third, contact with the vocation director and share with him about, and he will help you to discernment on the vocation.
Go for it. It's a gift to be able to pursue the Lord's voice and to be able to put yourself out there and to take that risk. So just go for it.